You read that right. We got every bit of 100 mile an hour out of the all-new supercharged Kawasaki Teryx5 H2 before the 98 mile an hour governor reeled us back in. And we can attest that it has a suspension to match the 250 horsepower mill. We had a full day of testing in 100-degree plus temperatures out near the Southern California-Mexico border, pushing the machine to its absolute limits. You're getting a rare behind-the-scenes look at how the press test a vehicle at speed. Stick around. We'll kick things off with a trailside walk-around right after this message.
I've tested everything.
But this was a sound.
You can change direction like that.
Speeds not of this earth. I don't know if he's sold West clearance on H2. But then again, I just drive the damn thing.
Okay, we're taking a little break during our ride here. I just want to give you guys a closer look at some of the details of this machine. Here's your two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive lock switch right there. The power mode selector, it shows up here that we are at full power, and you got your suspension over here. It's three switches, firm, normal, and soft. It shows you on the dash right there that we are in the firmest setting because we just hit a big whoop section. Very easy to change and adjust on the fly as the terrain changes ahead of you. Like that feature. Solid power, they tell us this machine will go 90 mile an hour plus. They don't give us an exact number, but you can see the steering wheel here has a lot of different controls. I'm sure here are your stereo controls, which we're not even looking at. We like just listening to the engine. You might have noticed if you heard any of this during the ride part of our review, you can hear the chirp from the supercharger. Got a good look of the harnesses, front seat, back seat. 33-inch tires on this machine, holding up very nice. Got your intercooler, supercharger up here. For the supercharger. Look at this exhaust. It's actually not crazy loud. Sounds really good, especially going in on and off the gas. That supercharger kicks in and out. But you can see the supercharger is right up underneath there. Very roomy, also much like the KRX. Even though this is not a KRX, it is all new from the ground up. And you can see the Garmin GPS system here. Huge screen. This is only in the deluxe model. Adjustable grab bar for the passenger. Tilt steering wheel. Both seats recline. I think you got 6 inches of back and forth. For there, looking at the front suspension. During our whoop testing today, it worked flawlessly. Even you could just stay into the gas and it just floats over that stuff. And here you can see some of the accent lighting on the front. Suspension, very comfortable machine for both passengers and drivers. Lots of room in here. Lots of speed, great suspension that matches the horsepower, 250 horse. CVT is working great. This is a little different version on the CVT, which we will get into a little bit more later, but there are, even though it's a standard CVT, it does not have a centrifugal clutch. It has some other features involving a bearing and other stuff that kind of keeps the belt engaged and prevents a lot of wear. And by the way, the belt on this thing is massive. Lots of testing going into this machine. This CVT, they tell us, will go the distance. You're not gonna have to worry so much about belt changes.
Hi, I'm Bill Kubis. I'm a senior instructional designer for Kawasaki for the technical training programs for our technicians and for internal purposes. So I take it apart and then teach you how to work on it. So you had asked me a question. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say right now we're here, checking out, getting our first in-person look at the Teryx H2. And one of the questions that a lot of our readers have is it the same power plant as the Kawasaki Ridge, you know, the 4-cylinder? Let's go through that and
Sure.
tell us what's kind of similar, but what really makes this
Okay.
vehicle different.
So I get asked this question a few times. So the crank and cylinder head of this engine, it shares properties with the motorcycle engine. It's the specs and dimensions to create this horsepower. So they share similar dimensions, but there's a lot of things that are very different. When you're making so much horsepower, you have to have additional durability, lubrication, things of that nature. So if you want, I can show you some of the things that are very different along the way, and if you have questions, we can answer them.
Sure, let's start from the beginning.
First of all, obviously, supercharger. Okay, so with the supercharger, this supercharger is almost identical to what's on the motorcycle. It's proven technology that's been around for a while, and we know it works. Then we have, and separate than like if you had a turbo, this intercooler is cooling actually the air coming out from the supercharger, which has not gone through an exhaust like a turbo does. So you've got cool air going through the system. The biggest difference in the intake system, you have a single 40 millimeter throttle body for each cylinder and dual injectors. You have a 12 hole injector for low speeds, and then when you get about 5,000 RPM and above, you have these secondary ones, 10 hole injectors, that will change a different way it fogs the fuel into the engine. So kind of these taper off and these taper up at higher RPM. Another big feature is the wrist pin on this unit is hugely strong. It's the bottom of the piston, the casting. I've never seen a wrist pin like this. This is incredible.
Yeah,
and
look how thick that is.
The thickness of this wrist pin. So they're definitely working on durability. The top of the piston has like an anodizing to keep heat down. And then one other thing that's extraordinary is they also, where the spark plugs are kept, there's also a ventilation so that hot air, when this starts getting hot and this hot air can't go anywhere, it's allowed to vent out to keep things cooler. So avoiding detonation and keeping the engine top end cooler. So over here, I can show you some more additional durability for more horsepower. This has dual oil injection for the pistons. In the center, these injectors spray to the center of the pistons, and then for the exhaust side of the exhaust piston, you have oil injectors. So you talk about lubrication and you talk about cooling. Definitely a big difference because we have a lot more horsepower. Also on the crankshaft, the wrist pin is 19 millimeters. It's a big wrist, so a big step up there. Additional features you could talk about. This is similar, one similarity to the Ridge, which is a positive. It has a single stator assembly, but it's actually like two stators. So you have a lot of output voltage to run your fans and all these accessory things that are on there. And I can show you that. For example, if you look at the 40 amp wire gauge for the cooling system, that is impressive. This guy is blowing through two radiators right here. And people ask, well, why are they stacked? If you really look at it, it's about increasing cooling capacity without taking a bunch of displacing of space.
Yeah, this connector is huge.
Yes, that's 40 amps. So this automotive style fan, it's blowing a lot of air. So again, lubrication and cooling has been thoroughly thought out when you start getting more horsepower. It also has an oil cooler. So again, cooling is a top priority. And then if you move to our drivetrain, also on the transmission, they've added louvers to the cases to increase, even keeping the transmission cool down. So let's move on to our drivetrain. So CVT system, I had a lot of questions about this, and I can explain, even myself, I noticed some huge differences. The biggest one is in here, this bearing, this needle bearing right here. Normally in these type of systems, when the unit is not moving and the engine's running, you have the belt in there kind of doing this deal, right? So that's where you have to adjust belt deflection. So you have to go and change some shims to change it. In this model, you don't have to do that. There's no adjusting of the belt deflection because we can keep the sheave closer together because of this bearing. So when it comes to grab it, it doesn't have to come in all the way. So maintenance, less maintenance, and more durability for sure. And in the cooling, this big cooling fan area here picks up air from the air snorkel from the filter on the top of the back of the vehicle, brings it in here, This fan spins in here. This controls the airflow and cools both of these CVTs. And we keep an eye on how hot it's getting in there. We have a sensor built in on the exhaust side of the CVT that lets us know what the temperature is of the CVT at all times. If for some reason there's extreme heat or something's going on, it'll give you a little light on the dash saying your CVT, maybe you have something blocking the intake or something like that. The belt itself has also been increased for durability. So once we get through here, now we go to the transmission. This comes from here to the input shaft. Here's your transmission. This is your low range, high range, neutral, and it is a live rear axle. There's no limited slip, it's live. Goes from here down your drivetrain to our front differential, which has an actuator, which allows you to go from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive limited slip to four-wheel lock.
Fully locked, yeah.
Fully locked.
Yeah, it does have a fully lockable front.
Yeah, and the thing also that people don't realize it's in here is sometimes when the front wheel speed can be different than the rear wheel speed. You go off a jump, front wheels land first, the rear wheels are going at a different speed than the front wheels now. So built inside here is kind of what we call like a limited slip, so you can address that, so you don't cause the drivetrain to have the stress of different speeds from front to rear wheels.
Safety mechanism.
Safety mechanism.
Apart that front.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So that's how you get all that power that we talked about to the ground.
Ton of focus on cooling for this much power.
You have to have the cooling and lubrication. So your initial question was in comparison to the Ridge, we have a lot more horsepower, so we have to pay a lot more attention to how we keep it cool and how we keep it lubricated, and you just saw how we did that.
There's basically some similarities in appearance, but much beefier engine.
I mean, just the fact you have 4 throttle bodies in a supercharger, that alone is enough to tell you there's a big difference.
Yeah, this is not an engine that a supercharger was thrown onto. It is built for a supercharger.
100%. And the ECU has all the programming for that. There's a lot more going on than people realize. I mean, appearance is one thing, and actual end results are another. And then, you have to have the mechanical with the electrical as well. There's a lot going on in the electrical system, the ECU working with the suspension. So there's big differences, big differences.
I believe this is the CVT duct right here for air, and we haven't had any overheating issues with the CVT or the engine. It's been running about 185 to 190, as it sits. Lots of features on this machine to keep it cool, including the dual radiator system that's up here under the front hood. And look at the slope of this thing. You can rock crawl these. They're not just high-speed desert and dune machines. Solid power for rock crawling, great clearance. I think there's 16 inches or more underneath this machine. 24 inches of suspension travel in the rear and about the same in the front. 23 and a half, I believe it was. Working great. No kicking or anything at high speed, even through those big whoops. There you go. 2026 model year.